Hey, it's Dave. So in this video, I'm going to go through what's my strategy, values, approach in preparing my kids for the future. Now, I've just jotted down just in the past 15 minutes about 7 pages of handwritten notes. So I want to go through this, and I might fumble a bit, but hope to get across and articulate kind of an overall strategy that I have that I'm really counting on, that I'm really placing actually my number one priority in terms of time and focus and energy. And that is to prepare my kids and to raise them in the right way where they'll be prepared for the future. I'm sure a lot of you guys are feeling it. We are living in a very fast-paced world. You have technology, everything changing. AI is completely turning the game upside down. And kids need to learn how to navigate this world. And as they become adults, they need to have the tools and the thinking and to know how to not just survive, but to thrive. And this is difficult because a lot of adults don't know how to do this either. Recently, one of my viewers asked, in this age of fast-paced AI, where we might see AGI or artificial general intelligence in the coming years, what can someone do to prepare their kids, right, to live in that type of world? In my opinion, I think a lot of schools and traditional thinking, traditional education, they're far behind. For example, AI is such an important, I think, topic, and it's so profound in its impact in society and people's lives that I think this should be forefront in schools and curriculums and just everyday topics that schools cover. I think it's going to be a while before schools are able to even digest it and understand what's going on. For me, I take this front row seat where my wife and I, for context, we homeschool our kids. Our kids are ages 5 and 8, and we're really involved day in and day out. For me, I'm constantly showing my kids like what I'm working on, and I'm showing them the latest AI things that I'm using to develop software and content and even lesson material for a language learning app we're making. And I'm showing my kids like the strengths and weaknesses. We're having top discussions around the table regarding the future of AI, right? And what are the risks and dangers? What are the benefits? And a lot of these conversations might just be between myself and my wife, but my kids pick it up and they actually join in the conversation because they're involved every day being exposed to this stuff cutting edge. Now, I think going forward, one of the most important things kids need as they become adults in this fast-paced world is they need clarity. They need to understand things clearly, not be overwhelmed, not be confused. And that takes a lot of discernment because the world is very complex and there isn't a lot of people that have that type of clarity. But in order to have that clarity, I think what is underneath it is you need to have strong beliefs and conviction. I think this is probably one of the most rarest and is the most valuable thing, right, a person can have is strong beliefs and strong convictions, not borrowed convictions and beliefs, right, from others or the crowd, etc., but really like innate, meaning it's deep inside. They hold on to the very clear thinking, worldview, beliefs that they hold and that they've formed, right, and throughout their whole life. I think what's usually lacking is you've got a world that's filled with kind of a precedent where you have institutions that have cultivated a cultivated following in people, meaning they've cultivated not independent thinkers and strong convictions in a person's life, but rather they cultivate a system of rules and punishments and rewards, and you're supposed to follow the system, and if you do, you get rewarded. If you don't, you get punished. Kids grow up without having clear convictions and beliefs, and they're not prepared for the world ahead. And you see a lot of kids, they grow up, they're 18, 19, 20, 21, I don't know, 25, and they don't know what they really want to do with life. They don't have that clear direction. And that's because I think a lot of it is they don't have the clear conviction and beliefs because they've been in an environment that hasn't fostered that at all. So the question is, how do you build this character, right? How do you build discernment and clarity? And I think it's not through this surface level teaching kind of moral, surface level things to kids. Oh, do this, act this way, be kind, all this stuff. Not adding on more rules and obligations to kids, but rather it's through an approach of going deep. And you need to go really deep, I think, in order to make it happen. I think there are certain portals, I call them, in life, where we can enter a place and it could lead us down a path of a lot of understanding and a lot of learning and appreciation. And in a certain field, as we go deeper and deeper into it, and we pick up with awe and appreciation the complexity and the beauty of things, we pick up on wisdom, we pick up on knowledge, and we pick up, I think, on what's ultimately true. And from there, we form this foundation of how we start to understand the world. And it might just be in one area at first, but that understanding starts to grow. And that's how I think people and kids develop clear thinking and clear convictions of their own. Now, I think there are way too much surface level and shallow kind of exposure that we're giving to kids. For example, in our education system, generally speaking, we teach our kids math, 1 + 1 = 2, but do we really dive into the awe, majesty, the awesomeness of math? It's a crazy topic if you really, really appreciate it, but rather than motivating kids through really trying to dive into and understand the awesomeness of math, right, and the power of math, we just go right into, 1 + 1 = 2, and figure out 5 times 5 = this. If you don't, you get a -1, or you get a C or D on your score, right? And so they're motivated by these intrinsic things rather than having this intrinsic appreciation of what they're really doing. Same thing goes with almost any topic. Let's say we're telling kids to read this, right, to memorize this, and they just follow along. They don't really understand and appreciate what's going on. And I think a lot of it is the education system doesn't really understand a lot of times and appreciate the depthness of a lot of these fields. A lot of it is, if you look throughout history, we've lost this appreciation of many fields at once, right? And through the Industrial Revolution, et cetera, and through the modern education system, people are taught they should specialize in one area, right, and just focus. And we've lost, I think, this multidisciplinary appreciation across many fields of really being interested and mesmerized by how deep and profound some of these things are. And so therefore you have the kids, they go through the motions of school, they're not really interested, they're not being educated in awe and wonder, rather it's through bore and chore, and they become of age, let's say 18 years old, they don't have conviction, right? They don't have strong and clear thinking, they're lost, and all they're used to do is follow. And that's what they're good at. They're good at following instructions, following the system. But that's not how I think people are gonna be the most effective and impactful in life, by just being good at following. All right, so I think one of the another keys is to build strength. And that's something I'm constantly reminded of, is strong people who aren't just easily swayed by the mob, by social media, by culture, etc. But you have this strength and this inner strength. I like this concept of Renaissance man, or the Renaissance person. And it's not, the concept that I resonate with is, it's not a shallow understanding across many areas. I think that's our traditional education system. That's our traditional kind of cultural approach, right, to understanding knowledge, education, all this stuff. But to me, the concept of the Renaissance person, and what really birthed the Renaissance and made it into a long-lasting period of revival in so many different areas, was that they came into this realization that if you can have a real and deep proficiency, and not just proficiency, but appreciation across many areas, what happens is this starts to cross-pollinate each other, those fields and those areas of interest and proficiency and appreciation. And what happens is it gives you more understanding and more appreciation than you would have had if you would have just stuck in one or two areas. And so you've got this amazing kind of fertile garden of appreciation, understanding that's only possible through the cross-pollination of those interests and those. But the key is, it's not just having many fields of interest, but it's going deep in each of those fields. If you don't go deep enough, you don't get into that deep understanding and the deep awe and wonder of that field. You don't tap into the principles and the key ideas, and you don't really own them. It doesn't become one with you. And because of that, you don't get the mastery. You don't get that strength you can find in that field. And you gloss over it, and you go to the next field and you do the same thing. You gloss over it, and you don't tap into the power of this Renaissance concept of the Renaissance all-around person. And that's the whole, I think, one of the crux, or one of the reasons why kids grow up in an environment of promoting kind of weakness, insecurity, a bunch of shallow, just in exposure, in the sense that they're not going deep enough in each of the fields of interest. And that leads to a lack of deep appreciation, and you've got just a lot of shallow exposure, but what you're left with is you're not left with strength. You're not left with clarity, with strong conviction, with world shapers, like people who can change history. That's not what you're left with. One kind of anecdote was my wife took my kids to this one kind of karate, taekwondo class. And I was telling her, like, classes are a mixed bag. Mostly classes tend to go to the shallow exposure area. And the reason why is when you're dealing with a class, the larger the class is, usually, the teacher has to deal with classroom management, right? It's basically keeping the kids in line, making sure they don't misbehave, making sure things don't just degenerate into chaos. And in order to do that, you have to, as a teacher, you create a system of rules, benefits, punishment, etc. And you try to keep the kids in line with that. And another thing is it's hard to go deep because all the kids are in different areas of expertise in terms of knowledge. All the kids are in different, let's say, maturity points. They have different backgrounds and understanding. So it's hard to really go deep with all of the kids. And so the result is, in most cases, generally speaking, with classes, and the larger classes especially, you're left with kind of more of a shallow experience, let's say, with whatever you're doing, right? Whether it's music or art or academic subject or karate, etc. Anyways, with this one class we went to, a martial arts class, it was a lot of just like, I told my wife, let's go watch first, right? Because she was wanting to enroll right away. I'm like, let's watch, see. And my hunch is it's going to be a lot of babysitting, very little like really depth of really getting to the heart and meat of the concepts and what really makes a martial art special. And we went, and yeah, the result was, it was pretty disappointing, right? Very just shallow and not much of real teaching. And I told my wife, if you can have someone who really understands like the depthness of, let's say, that martial art, and if you can give the right environment, and preferably it's a one-on-one environment or a very small group environment, and you go deep and you kind of show the power and the awesomeness of what you're doing, right? And you have to cultivate that motivation. And that's one of the other things, is a lot of times we're forcing our kids to do something, or we're pushing them to do something when they don't have the motivation themselves. Like, you might think, oh yeah, this thing, karate, will be awesome for you. But then they're like, why do I want to do that? And I think one of the big precursors or requirements is the kids need to have that motivation. And it's underrated and underappreciated how difficult and how important seeding that motivation really is. I was telling my wife, she started taking my kids to do a jiu-jitsu private lesson once a week. And I'm telling her, like, what you need to do is, the first few times it's interesting, right? It's fun. But kids can lose interest very fast over time because the newness wears off. And what the kids need to do is they need to have that motivation. How do you get that motivation? I'm like, you've got to show like how awesome that thing is, like why it's awesome, right? And a lot of times you got to tap into who is doing this in the awesome ways and what are they doing. So I'm like, yeah, show the kids like some YouTube videos on jiu-jitsu, have the teacher actually take half the time. It's an hour class, have him take half the time and show the kids the best jiu-jitsu videos, his favorite jiu-jitsu videos of all time, and have him explain what's so awesome about jiu-jitsu. And I'd rather have that approach where, hey, if you have an hour class, go 40 minutes on motivating the kids. Show them some awesome videos and tell them why it's awesome. What's so special about, let's say, jiu-jitsu or martial arts or whatever you're doing. Let the kids ingest it, model it for the kids, right? Actually show yourself doing that and what it is accomplishing, what it's doing. Give that appreciation, and then do 15, 20 minutes of having the kids like roll around or whatever, try it out. But that type of thing that's the natural kind of sequence of things where motivation needs to start. The kids need to be inspired. They need to see the vision. They need to be awed and see wonder in what you're doing before, right? They're really going to invest in trying to learn something and do something that to them can be difficult at times. Yeah, and a lot of these things is, I'm not just talking about, oh yeah, you can knock someone down or you can do something. When you go deeper and deeper in a field, I think what typically happens, and here's the thing, a lot of this stuff isn't talked about in many circles. But in my personal experience, the deeper you go in a certain field, what happens is it starts to intersect with many other fields. For example, the deeper you might go in martial arts, it will intersect with philosophy, with art, with music, with movement, with nature, with many fields. And it's actually very profound. The deeper you go in a field, they start to blur in terms of its intersections. And that's how deep you need to take it. That's what's going to be the most interesting, the most motivating for kids when they understand how deep something is and how it can actually help them understand a lot of other amazing and deep things as well. I want to take an example of nature. So nature is so rich, so powerful. I think it has so much just potential to help kids build that clarity, the conviction, the beliefs, the strength that they need. And a lot of reason is because nature is so complex. It's unified. It's amazing. There's nothing you can do to just like, as much as you try to dumb it down, nature still is just awe-inspiring. How many animals are there? How many species? Like, what's their relationship to each other? What are, like, look at the plants and the different elements of nature. It's so deep and so profound. And once you go deep enough into nature, you start to see that it starts to intersect with everything else in life. And that's how deep I think, and that's how deep I'm trying to take my kids with nature. Versus, let's say, the typical approach, oh yeah, let's do like a 1 week camping trip or something. Let's go hiking once in a while. It's like, you're not getting your kids deep enough to really tap into the profoundness, right, of nature. You're just giving them a shallow exposure. The result is, sure, they might have fun here and there, but they're not going to get that lifetime of value, of super high value that actually shapes their character, builds strength and conviction and clarity, really makes them like able to navigate and be impactful in the world. This is one of the reasons why for my kids, we started to take them on these super long RV trips through national and state parks. So when my youngest was like 1.5, maybe, before she was 2, we started taking these RV trips. The first place I took them was to Yosemite, because Yosemite was probably one of the most amazing places I've been to in terms of nature, especially Yosemite Valley. And I told my wife, like, yeah, let's go. I want to really show my kids and you like the power of nature. And so we spent 7 nights camping at Yosemite Valley. And it's such a popular campground. Like, the limit is actually 7 nights per year that you can camp in Yosemite Valley. So we took the maximum limit. You have to reserve campgrounds like 6 months in advance. And there's such a tiny window. There's like less than a minute of opportunity at this one time, once per month, that you have to reserve the right campsite. But we planned out the trip. We rented an RV. We went and we had a blast. And one of the reasons we had a blast was because it was 7 nights. See, if you did like 2 nights, you'd be okay. But here's the thing. After 3 or 4 nights, you start to let down your guard and you start to assimilate with your environment and you start to really like taste and live in, right, the place that you are. And I noticed in our first trip, after maybe 3 nights, 4 nights, like it became a completely different world. It starts to become your home, right? And there's a different angle and your relationship with that place and nature changes once you start to relax and become one with that place. And it takes time to do that as well. After that, we planned out a 4.5-month trip where we just went around half the US and picked out the best national parks and state parks we could find. Took our, at that time, 2-year-old and 5-year-old, and it was amazing. We're seeing things that it's just, you just shake your head and you're like, oh my gosh, how is this possible? We're having campfires nightly and hikes and seeing the biggest trees in the world, the most amazing tide pools, the mountains. You're seeing animals galore, plants, just so much stuff. And most of all, because it's not just a 1-week thing, it's actually months on end. And there's no hope. After a month, you start giving up hope that you're ever going to go back home in a way. You just start to accept your surroundings as is. And you start to accept, hey, this campground or the campground I'm at right now is my home, right? This is my destiny. I can't get out of it. And you start to relax, and it's a different feeling when you have no way out and you've given in to that place. And after doing like over 100 nights of campfires and roaming and the craziest national parks and state parks, we're building a foundation. right? We're building a foundation where the kids are starting to understand, like, wow, the power of nature is crazy, and nature is so complex, and they start to become one with it. They start to appreciate it, and that is starting to tap into the profoundness, right, of not just nature, but the profoundness of life. And nature's connected to all these other fields, right? And so once you start building a foundation in one area, that starts to kind of branch out. And now that starts to seed other areas where they're like, hey, this area is cool. Nature is amazing. How about this area or this area in life? And it starts to seed this curiosity that can be applied to all areas. And yeah, generally speaking, I think my kids are very curious. They ask a ton of questions, and they're naturally curious because it's a response to what they've seen, right? It's a response to what they've experienced. It's a response to the profoundness that they've been part of. Once you become one with something so amazing as nature, and you have a million questions, right, that are sparked because of that profoundness and complexity, that transfers over to many areas in life. So we did that year, and that was 2020, the year of COVID. And then the following year, and the next 2 years, actually, we did the same thing, similar things. We did 4 or 5 months on the road. We mixed it up in different ways, but yeah, the whole idea was, yeah, we spent basically 3 years, like doing 4 or 5 months in nature, hundreds of nights in our RV camping, and seeing just the most craziest things. And you call me, in a sense, it's crazy to think, like, why would you spend so much time and energy? You know how much, like, investment that is? That's a lot of sacrifice too, in the sense of other things I could be doing with my time and energy, right? It's not, I have nothing to do and I'm like, hey, let's spend 4 or 5 months in an RV traveling around. No, that takes a lot of planning, a lot of things I can't do during that time. But that's how much I value tapping into an area of life and going deep and seeding, right, the appreciation in my kids to the place where, yeah, they're not gonna, it's not about remembering, oh, we went to this place or that place. I don't care about whether they remember any of the places we went camping. I'm going deeper. I'm going much more valuable. I'm going into their psyche. I'm going into their soul. I'm going into their whole value system and worldview, where they have experienced oneness with nature, oneness with a profound, complex, just portal into knowledge. And I think nature has amazing wisdom and truth as well. And so they've tapped into that for almost half of the year, for 3 years straight. It's not I don't care about they remember some whatever, what they did. I care about what it's shaping them to be. And that investment is completely worth it for me, and all of the time and energy we spent to make that happen. Yeah. So another thing, I'll kind of transition into a different area, is sports. Yeah, and here's the thing. It could be a lot of different, like a lot of areas have a lot of profoundness. It's just that 99% of the people who are doing it aren't really tapping into that profoundness, right? But yeah, one area is sports that I think has some profoundness that I'm wanting my kids to tap into as well. So I was taking these tennis kind of hitting sessions with someone I found in Austin, and I was playing tennis like every day. And I'm probably above average. I played tennis on my high school team and didn't play much between, but could pick it up and was trying to get better. I didn't think my kids really were at the age that they could enjoy it or really get into it. Also, I thought my kids, they had some challenges with just coordination and different physical stuff and sensory processing. As I felt it would come later, but I was surprised. I tried this one approach where I'm like, hey, I'll expose my kids a bit and then see what happens, right? So I had my kids come out once to just watch me play a bit. And they're watching me hit the ball, and my partner, who's really good actually, he played in college, he hit the ball, and they're like, wow, this is crazy. And at first I'm like telling them, oh, it's not for you guys in a sense, don't worry about it, just want you guys to watch. But after a while they're like, oh, we want to play too, right? Even though they don't want to play, and they're trying to grab a racket or do something. So I got them a racket. And I followed this approach where I'm like, let's lead with motivation, right? Meaning, let's show them how fun it is. Let's show this profoundness of, let's say, tennis, and let that motivate and drive everything. And so we started to do that. They started wanting to play too. So what I would do is I would take them to my tennis kind of lesson hitting session. I would hit first for like 20, 30 minutes. And then toward the end, I would give them some time where they could get fed some balls, etc. In the beginning, they were having a hard time. Like they couldn't hit the ball over the net even. They were missing the ball most of the time. Like my youngest was having a hard time. Just like we would just have her like hit the ball to roll it to the net. Basically, that was her level. And another thing we did was I made it a point where we wouldn't dictate and force them to do something or teach them in a traditional manner of, you need to do this, memorize this, do this. My approach was, I felt like the most important thing was motivation. The second most important thing was modeling, was them seeing a massive amount of data, basically. If you were to compare this with neural nets, right, in AI, their biological neural nets need a lot of input of seeing what tennis is, right? So rather than just saying, oh, take your racket and do this, right? I want to show them 100, 1,000 times, 10,000 times, right? Swinging, like people who know how to play tennis, swinging the racket, what they're doing. And then the people who know how to play, they could explain maybe to them, like, this is why I'm doing this or how I'm hitting the ball, etc. And all of that is comprehensible input, meaning it's data input where they can understand, and it's feeding the data into their biological nets where they can now shape an understanding of the complete game of tennis and what each right stroke does and why they do that. And so by the time they're starting to hit the ball, they have that context and they know what they need to do. That's so much better than memorizing certain positions when they don't have that context, right? The context needs to come first. The data comes first. The massive amounts need to come first before you try to expect the kids to do certain things in a certain way. So I had my tennis partner and I made sure that I'm like, hey, let's not tell them what to do, right? Let's not give them lessons. Let's just have fun with them, play stuff and just let them do what they want to do and model it. So we'll show them what we're doing and explain it. Hey, they don't have to do what we're doing if they don't want to. They can do something else. And that's totally fine. And the result is they get more of this personal ownership of the experience. They don't feel like they're being told what to do. They don't feel like they're doing something wrong or incomplete all the time. They're feeling like they're going at their pace. And so we've been doing this for a good maybe 4 months or so, maybe 3.5 months or so. But it's been amazing. My kids actually have improved a lot, far faster than I would have ever imagined, anticipated. And the most important thing is they love it. They actually really like doing it. And if I was a kid, I love doing it too, because I'm going there, and then I'm doing what I want to do. No one's telling me what to do in terms of forcing me to whatever. We're doing kind of fun drills and fun games with the kids, and they're learning lots of things, and they're in control. And the other thing we're doing is, which is probably, I think, the most important, is we're pushing the idea of modeling, not just to, for example, me and my partner playing and modeling the game in front of them, but we're pushing it where I'm taking them to competition, to tennis tournaments. And one of the reasons why I'm doing this is because I want them to taste a deeper appreciation of what tennis is, but also at a certain level of tennis, the competition starts to get really intense, right? And I want them to start to taste and feel that competition, but I also wanted them to taste what that how people are moving and almost creating movement with their bodies and doing things with an object at a very super high level, what that focus intention is and what it's like at a professional level. And I want them to get used to that and for them to see what this kind of world-class level of competition and movement and skill is, and to understand tennis as a game at a different level than just a hobby level. Or hobbies are cool, but to understand a bit more, to appreciate it in a deeper level. And so we took them to a tournament in Dallas about a month or two ago, and it was a professional tournament, and we watched the semis and the finals, and this dark horse candidate just came out of the blue. He was a qualifier, won the whole thing. It was the craziest tournament, and we loved it. And the kids loved it. They're like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. And even though they're still learning how to keep score with tennis and all this stuff and what the game is, but it's they understand, wow, this is fun. There was a professional tennis tournament about a month ago or so in Austin. And we took them to that tournament for several days. And it was awesome too, because we caught on to an underdog player that made it really far. She made it to the semifinals, almost to the finals. I think she could have won it, but we got really into that. and took it to a whole nother level of understanding tennis, the game, how it's played, what it's really. And I think my kids are still obviously being exposed to it, but the whole idea is I want them to be exposed to it on a deeper level than just a shallow level. This weekend, I want to take them to Houston, where there's a professional tournament that's starting. I'm going to take them for the qualifying, the beginning part, but also the ending parts, like the semis and the finals. And it's a big investment in terms of it's taking up a lot of time, traveling out there, finding places to stay, etc. And it's what are my kids like ages 5 and 8 doing like at these professional tennis tournaments? Right? It's not like I'm trying to make them professional tennis athletes or something. I don't think that's the case. It's more there's something about it where there's seen value, right? There's like this treasure that you need to, that's out there that you can tap into if you go deep enough. If you appreciate it deep enough, you tap into it. And once you tap into what's really valuable behind that, you start to see that's connected to everything else. It's connected to all the other treasures in all of the other fields. That's how you know that you've gone deep enough with something, is you start to see the value. Oh my gosh, this is crazy in terms of what you're learning. And then the insights you're gaining with not just that thing, but with other, like how you're able to cross apply, right, your understanding, and you start to see it just multiply. That's how you know you're getting really deep into something. So that's what I'm doing. I don't think it's a simple process, right? It's not an easy process. It's not a short-term process either. This is going to take a while. I might have to go to a lot more tennis tournaments, do a lot more tennis stuff. But again, like the pieces are in place, right? And yeah, it's a similar strategy across all fields, right? It's make it enjoyable, start with the motivation, with the inspiration, right? Don't settle for the shallow exposure. Have the high ambitious goals of really going deep with something and not stopping until you get really into the treasure of the field that you're going into. Yeah. So let's see. So what can we do to really do this across fields? So I was talking to my wife last night. And I'm like, yeah, I think our kids, we need to find something with music and art. There's a couple of fields that I'm wanting them to tap into, this deep appreciation, awe, because those fields proven historically that you've got some treasure, some really valuable stuff. They're gonna link with other fields as well. And I'm like, what we need to do is we need to find people who really love what they're doing with their skills and can explain it, what they're doing. My wife's, why not just take them to a class, like an art class or something? I'm like, art classes, like typically it's a tough one because you're dealing with, again, multiple different levels. The teacher's just trying to get something done, like a babysitting, just pass the time type of thing. Are they really trying to have these super ambitious goals of tapping into the profound power and beauty of art? So I don't know. I think what would be most bang for our buck would be to try to find someone who's really into art, who's really good at it, but who understands, who's tapped into, right, the depthness and power of art, and to try to get exposure to that person, to be around that person, to hear to hear in their own words what they're doing, so my kids can understand what they're doing. That type of exposure, it's like a mentoring. Like back in the day, they had this whole like apprenticeship, this whole, if you're a blacksmith, you always had people around you that you're learning from, right? And I think we've lost that in our modern day in a lot of ways. We don't have that passing down. And I think the key is you got to find the rare person who has tapped into the real depthness of whatever you're trying to tap into yourself, right? And so if it's music, if it's art or something, the first criteria is, find the rare person who's tapped into that. And then the next step is absorb, right, that appreciation, absorb what that person is doing, follow, shadow, just be near that person, try to get the explanation in a comprehensible way. So then you get inspired, you get motivated, and that portal of understanding, right, into those areas start to open up, and you start to make gains into really building expertise, familiarity, depthness into those areas. Another area or areas I'm building depthness and foundation to my kids is the area of business and software and design. So a lot of the things that I'm doing in terms of building software, design, etc., I'm showing my kids every day, and I'm sharing with my kids like the problems I'm working on and the designs I'm doing, and I'm having them actually pitch in to those designs. So they are having ideas themselves, they're testing. So my kids are actually the number one beta testers for this new app we're working on. It's a language learning app. And it's cool because they've been part of the whole process from day one. They've seen like the mock-ups by hand, they've seen the first prototypes, they've seen the second. Like we're actually doing stuff where every day we get a new prototype because we're changing things. And so it's like they're seeing daily prototypes being changed, different approaches we're doing. And I'm showing them all the stuff with AI we're doing to create content and materials and all this stuff. And it's cool because it's every day and because it's constant over months and months of time, I start to see the depthness and I start to see that appreciation and that awe. If it was just like 1 week, then oh yeah, whatever. It's like a shallow thing, right? But because it's like month after month, and I've been doing this for like the past 4 months in terms of software. Actually, even before that, we were like showing some of the stuff we've done and we're doing. But because this is daily and ongoing, I start to see my kids get a depthness to it. It's strange. I was showing my kids like some of the latest designs I was working on, and they were pitching in ideas. And then we're watching this one video of doing this one kind of creative animation technique on this design software called Figma, which helps you make app design. And it's kind of this rainbow circle that would like animate, and like I just glanced at this video. I was showing my kids. My kids, what in the world? Like, how do you do that? And they're like mesmerized. And my 8-year-old is, I want to know how to do that because he's really learning like all this stuff in Figma, which I don't know how he does, but he actually knows a lot because he's like seeing me do this and he's actually working on himself. It's like crazy. So because he really wants to learn, I'm like, okay, let's watch the video and let's try it. And we actually end up doing it. It takes us like 30, 40 minutes. And he's so happy that he's got this crazy animation of a rainbow circle going around. And it's actually a fun project. But the look in my kids' eyes when they saw that kind of animation was this like wide open, like eyes wide open, and this thing of, I want to know, I want to learn how to do that. And it's not because it's their first exposure to Figma or that software, etc., but it's because they have all that built up foundation of they've been playing around, they've been building stuff, they've been designing stuff, and this is like the next step, right? They know that this can be something that they know how to do this, it can unlock more. And I didn't even think that was possible for kids so young, but yeah, it's possible because it's this, what I'm talking about in terms of the deep appreciation for fields and tapping into that kind of profoundness, I think is irrespective of age. Right? It doesn't really matter whether you're 5 years old or 60 years old. It's more that motivation. Sure, there are different skill levels and different, like the pace of what you could do, right, at different ages. But I think the more important thing is that motivation and the incremental stepping into it, going deeper and deeper into that field and having that just progressively, right, continue. That is the most important thing, and it trumps age as well. Yeah, really interesting stuff. With business, we talk about business a lot, show them a lot of figures, go places. Business is so profound, I think, in a lot of ways. It's complex, it's meaningful, and to give kids an appreciation of it is to let them step into the profoundness of that. The other couple months ago, we have a person we know that runs a boba shop, and he was gracious enough to not just invite us, but to show us the workings of his boba shop. So he would take us in the back shop and show us all the stuff they're doing, and what he buys, and what materials. And I was talking with the kids, and the concepts of how many customers, the average amount that they pay, and the margin, like how much you're making total, but how much your supplies and workers and business and building, all this stuff. It's like you can get a shallow understanding of it. But if you can get a deep understanding and a progressive incremental kind of depthness to it over time, that's consistent over time, to build a foundation where you really get it and you really appreciate it, right? That builds a foundation. That is something that's valuable. And yeah, I think it's accessible, it's possible, right? I think a lot of times people are like, oh, it's this thing of, it's not realistic, it's not possible, whatever. Stick them in school, let them learn a curriculum or whatever. But the real valuable things aren't found in the school curriculum. It's not found in the classroom, I don't think. The real valuable things is found when you uncover and you go deep in an area with focus, with the belief that you're getting into something super valuable. The deeper you go, once you find it, then you start to go into another field. You start to see everything link. Once you have 2 or 3 fields or 4 or 5 fields that you've gone really deep in, you start to find those treasures of profound understanding and and knowledge and wisdom and truth, and you see them interlink and it gets you more understanding in those fields, it starts to become this kind of cycle that's addictive in a way. That's just, you start to go to the next thing. And ultimately, that's the Renaissance vision, I think. I think that's where it came from. I don't think that's been explained very well in today's world of the context of that concept of Renaissance person. But to me, that's what it means. But the power of it is once you start tapping into each field and they start to interconnect and seed other fields, you start to gain a deeper in terms of character. And you start to build a clarity that you can't get with just one field. Sure, in one field, you know a lot about something. Maybe you appreciate one field, but you don't have the clarity in terms of how you understand the world, how you understand history, where the world has come and where the world is going. You just can't have that clarity with one field. It just doesn't come like that. It comes through having clarity across many fields that you start to see and understand the complexity of the world and history and the future in a completely different way and different angle. And it's from that type of depthness of multidisciplinary understanding, appreciation, that you start to have a deeper insight, a deeper thinking and vision into what's going on. And you start to have stronger beliefs and convictions of what you know is important, what you believe is important. And it becomes innate. It becomes one with you, where you're not just borrowing a conviction like, oh, someone said this is important, so therefore I think it's important. It's not like that. It really comes from within you. That's what I'm talking about. That's the conviction I'm trying to build with my kids. That is powerful, right? That is rare, and that's gonna move and shake things. What's also cool is, I don't know when the ending of the world is gonna be or whatever, but it's actually reproducible. Meaning, if you're able to teach that, right, to your kids, and maybe here's the other thing: maybe there'll be people watching this video who catch it, who it helps them to dive into these different fields. And you can teach others, right? I think there's a natural kind of thing with your own kids because you're spending so much time and you have the most responsibility to them. That's probably the most natural environment, but I don't think it's restricted to that. I tell my wife often that, I think our third child is actually YouTube or the world or people who I can interact with / share ideas and I can influence, because it's not just limited to my kids. If others can catch something and benefit from it, can have profound impact, right? And so the cool thing is this can be is transferable through generations to other people. And I think it's underrated. I think it's really underrated, the power of clear convictions. And I really think this is the pathway to getting there. So another area that I'm working on building kind of this deep appreciation for, and again, I think this is really at the heart and the center of my strategy in terms of preparing my kids to not just survive, but to really gift them with it's not just the tool set, it's the character set and it's the experience set. It's who they are, right? That's going to be ultimately the most important thing in terms of how they're able to navigate and interact with the world. But this one area I'm working on right now is the area of travel and the world and people. Starting this year, we're trying to do the trip. Who knows if it'll completely work out. A lot of these things are planning restricted or things can change. But we've got a 4 to 5 month world trip coming up. And in this trip, we're going to go through Asia, Europe, a bunch of countries. And my vision and my goal of this trip is I want to go deep, right? That's the whole point. I really don't care about, let's do some tourist thing and see this or that or whatever. I'm like, adds minimal value. What I want to do is I want to give my kids this connection to the world where they feel one with the world. But what is that world? Like, it's this idea, right? That in the beginning, until you can fill out the idea of people in the world and countries more concretely. And so the idea is take them to a bunch of countries, actually live in countries. So one Asia country we're going to live in for hopefully a month, and hang out with people, see how they live, how they think, how they interact, all that stuff, and really become one with the people and really let it soak in. And do this across as many countries. And obviously, some countries will be in and out shorter and we'll have to do less things like this. Other countries will be longer. But the whole idea is, yeah, tap into the culture, tap into the history, tap into what makes the people tick, right? Tap into the life and what are the hopes and dreams of people? What are the struggles? What are the challenges? What are the joys? And fill that out where there's this connection with people and the world. And ultimately, the idea is the stronger you have of that connection, the stronger you're going to have of this identity of who you're responsible for and who you can impact. Let me give you another story here. Several months ago, I was having dinner with some folks, and the guy next to me, he was saying, yeah, his 18-year-old or 19-year-old doesn't know what to do with his or her life and very confused, etc. And I'm like, my initial reaction, I shared this with him. I'm like, I don't think I think his daughter has seen enough of the world. And I don't think she's seen enough of the opportunities and needs of the world. Because if she did, she wouldn't be as lost. She would have more clear thinking and clear ideas of what she wants to do. And the reason in the context of that is if you were to really be connected to the needs of the world, you would be just floored. It's troubling. It's immensely troubling, the needs of the world. These aren't just faceless people, but if you actually get to know people and see their real challenges, it's like it's hard to be the same ever again. And if you can actually see the opportunities as well, right? The opportunities are amazing around the world in terms of what's happening. Change is happening. It's all around. And I think those things go together because it's not just the needs that are real, but the opportunities are there because oftentimes those can intersect and you can create something where the opportunities meet the needs. But yeah, it's like I told them, like, if I were you, and this is just a random idea, I'm like, I would take 6 months and travel with her. And the reason why I said this is because he was financially of the means where he was like, he's not doing anything. He's got substantial investments. So I'm like, take 6 months and travel the world, but don't just travel in like tourist locations. Go to real places with real needs. People find the needs and opportunities and just soak it all in. After the 6 months, your daughter's going to be completely changed in how she views the world and how she views her life and what she would want to do. That's the thing. Even people of means, though, they're hesitant. I don't know what you're talking about. They rather point the finger at the daughter saying, oh, figure out what to do, whatever. Maybe it's just they want a typical life. Like they just want her daughter to go to college and have a major and get a job. I don't know. But in my opinion, I think the knowing what to do, it comes from the conviction and the beliefs. But part of that comes from your relationship and identity and how you identify and relate to people, not just near you and next to you as family, but in your city, but also around the world. And that's what I'm trying to start seeding. I think it's an ambitious project. That's why I think it's going to take actually many years to get to the place where I'm wanting my kids to be. And I think it's going to take many years of long travel and in many countries and scenarios and with people to get them to the place where they are one with many needs and many people in the world and also opportunities. And they can have that identity where they're so connected. Yeah, it's going to be huge. I think it's worth it. It comes at a great cost in a sense of to travel 4 or 5 months out of the year. I think it's probably closer to 5 months actually, but it takes an immense amount of planning. I can't even do certain things because everything has to revolve around that. It's an immense amount, like to pack up and to move around also to that many countries. It's like immensely tiring. It's a grueling experience in a way, but it's worth it in my opinion, because how else am I going to build that connection that they need with people in the world to the point where their identity, like their psyche, it's unified? That's the thing. You can have something where you mentally think, oh yeah, I'm connected to the people, whatever, or there's 8 billion people in the world. You can have these mental kind of forced, I don't say forced, but ideas, but it's different when it's real. It's different when it's experienced on a different level. And yeah, that's part of, if my kids are going to take what they have in terms of their time and energy and their brain, but also their past experiences, and if they can have kind of this overall, let's say, Renaissance type of education upbringing, right, and have depthness and profound expertise in many different areas, and you add on top of that this connection with the world's and people's needs and opportunities around the world, then what you've got is you've got a really interesting combination of what I think could be, yeah, all coming together to present this overall kind of strategy and preparedness for my kids. And so that's the deeper strategy and insight, creating understanding, clarity, appreciation across many areas. You're tapping into what's real, you're tapping into understanding. And I think you're starting to tap into what's true as well. And that's building convictions and beliefs. You start to become independent in your thinking, in terms of your creativity. You become strong. You can navigate, I think, uncertain times and confusion because you've got it inside of you. You're not borrowing it from somewhere else. In a sense, you're not copying it. Like, you're building, and there's no shortcut to it. I think you build one piece at a time. And I think that's the hope for the future. The hope for the future is leaders and people who step up to really embrace others and to take everything that they've got, right, and all their understanding, insight, and try to make a difference, impact, help others. So anyways, that's an intro into some of my latest thoughts into an overarching strategy in terms of what I'm trying to seed into my kids, how I'm seeding different fields. I'm not very focused on trying to get them into some curriculum and get some type of achievement with certain grammar or vocabulary or whatever. A lot of those things, I feel, if you do the right thing, you'll get even better results. Meaning, rather than focusing on grammar and vocabulary and writing and all that stuff, if the kids learn to love to read, they love stories and communicating and reading, they're going to learn all of that. The problem is kids don't learn to love to read. Then they're not learning the grammar and vocabulary and all this reading comprehension, all this other stuff that follows, right? But if you learn to love to read and you start reading and you love it and you start digesting, consuming it, you'll learn everything else in terms of the grammar, vocab, and writing, everything else. You learn it better than all these other people that are forced it, right? Same thing with math, right? And same thing with all these other things, right? And a lot of these subject materials too, you can learn it better with the motivation if it's intrinsic and you actually understand, right, why you need to do it. Anyways, just some thoughts and hope it was helpful. And yeah, talk to you guys later.